I never was much of a video game person. I hardly ever played them as a kid. I hadn't played one in years before I picked one up at the pawn shop on my way home from work. I was browsing around the newly stored items before my eyes were drawn to this black case on the end of the shelf. Big red pixelated font in all capitals that said Dr. DED, but DED was spelled D-E-D without the A. It was only a couple megabytes, so I was sure my computer could run it. The clerk sold it to me for $10. I arrived home around 8 p.m. and inserted the disc into my PC. As soon as I did, the whole screen went black for a minute. Then an ominous tune started playing while the large title sequence filled the screen, and a demonic voice could be heard. My spine went cold. I didn't know what I was in for. It then played a cutscene where a black van could be seen driving in on a rainy night. The game was a pixelated mystique with a deep red atmosphere. For a game with 8-bit graphics, the visuals were exquisite. As the van was driving, some text popped up on the screen as the voice was reading it off. It then cut to a panning view of a suburban neighborhood while it was still raining. It cut back to the driving van for a few more seconds before it cut to a dark view of a house, before the van rolled up and parked in front of it. The screen then faded to a backyard. At the bottom of the screen was a gate that appeared to have a shadowy figure climbing over it. After the figure dropped down on the grass, nothing else happened. All that was on the screen was the rainy backyard with a large dark figure standing at the end. I then realized it was probably time to play. I moved the arrow key upward and the character began to slowly walk forward. I guess this character was the protagonist, but why would he climb the fence to a backyard? I proceeded to the yard after passing a small shed. I approached what looked to be a back door to a house. As I approached it, a prompt came up saying, "Space," so I pressed the space key. Then text came up saying, "It's locked." I then went back and the only other thing I could interact with was the shed. I approached the shed and pressed the space key. The screen did a black fading transition into a small storage room with gardening tools. I couldn't help but notice just how dark this game was in detail and color. Just a dark red atmosphere with creepy chiptune music and no context as to what this game even was. I pressed the right arrow key and the character moved across the shed where a gray key could be seen on the table. As the character approached the key, a noise played while the key went to the top right of the screen. I then proceeded out of the shed and to the back door. I pressed space and a cutscene played. It showed a little pixel character that looked like a blonde woman in a purple shirt. She grabbed something from the refrigerator and walked up a staircase. The next scene made me shiver. It did a slow pan up of a man from his large black boots to his black apron to his grotesque-looking zombie-like face with bloodshot eyes and a large metallic toothy smile. Or perhaps he had no skin around his mouth, so it looked like he was smiling. It was like he had a silver bear trap for a mouth. It then transitioned to a third-person view of the zombified character, who was the protagonist. Above my character, the text said, "Dr. DED," the title of the game. I moved the arrow key and he began moving. This wasn't a normal game. This was a horror game, as I could already see. My first guess was that Dr. DED was the villain and you try to run away from him or stop him. Boy, was I wrong. This was unlike any horror game I'd ever heard of. You are the pursuer. You are the horror. You are Dr. DED. I wasn't cut out for a game like this, but I needed my $10 worth. I walked into the kitchen and around the table. As I neared the refrigerator, a space prompt came up. I pressed space and the character opened up a drawer and pulled something out. I couldn't tell what it was at first because the graphics were so pixelated. I then walked up the staircase. At the top of the staircase was a hallway. There was an end table with a lit candle on it. The candle was in a brighter texture than the other objects. I approached it and the space prompt popped up again. As I pressed space, the candle went to the top right of the screen, next to where the kitchen tool could be seen. I then proceeded to the other end of the hallway and saw a door. I pressed space on the door and a cutscene played. The view was now in first person with a better detail. The door opened a crack, revealing the woman asleep in her bed. Then the protagonist's hand raised up in the view, holding the kitchen tool that I now could see was an electric mixer. He pressed the button as the mixer started spinning. It then faded back to the third-person gameplay view. Above the sleeping woman was a text that said, "Stacy." I approached the woman's bed and pressed space. As I did, she rolled over to the other side of the bed. I walked around to the side she was on before a prompt came up saying, "K." I pressed the K key. And what happened next made me want to turn the computer off. Without any fading, it immediately cut to a first-person cutscene that looked like an actual recorded video rather than a game. The protagonist grabbed the woman's hair. When she woke up in shock, the protagonist jammed the mixer into the woman's mouth. Blood gushed from her mouth as she was screaming and gagging. A K prompt appeared in the cutscene. Though I did not want to, I pressed the K key. The protagonist pulled the mixer out, showing that the woman's tongue was caught on it. He then pulled the tongue completely out of her mouth with the mixer. The sound effects were so lifelike, it was unbelievable. The woman was basically vomiting blood at this point. Another K prompt appeared. How is this not over yet? I thought. The protagonist raised up the candle and bashed it onto the woman's face before the entire bed caught on fire. It cut to a third-person view of the poor woman burning alive and the protagonist laughing maniacally. The next shot showed the view of the house with the car driving away. A fire could be seen in the top floor window. The screen went black as an eerie noise played. Some red text began typing across the screen. Mix and match. Then another text popped up saying, "Complete. Press space for next level." I sat there still in shock before I bursted out laughing. Mix and match? Seriously? I then realized this was just a goofy, dark humor game. I pressed space for the next level. There was then a loading screen of the main protagonist, Dr. DED, smiling at the screen holding a mallet. The text above reads, "Dead.kills. Kills spelt with a Z." The game was advertising its own website, I guess. Video games do that all the time. The game then faded to the next intro cutscene. This time it showed a rainy city. The black van was seen driving past a streetlight and into an alleyway. The dark figure stepped out and climbed up the ladder to the outside staircase. The protagonist, the doctor I guess I should call him, was shown climbing through a window and into an apartment. The level started. I moved toward the dim light of the apartment until I reached a desk. I pressed space in front of the desk, and a pair of pliers appeared in the inventory on the top right of the screen. I proceeded to the door next to the desk and pressed space. The screen faded to another room that looked to be a maintenance office. There was a wall of tools and screws. There appeared to be a saw that was displayed in a brighter texture than the tools around it. I approached the wall and pressed space. The saw was placed in the inventory. Well, this won't end well, I thought. I moved farther to the right in a darker area, where a man sitting in front of a rainy window could be seen while on a laptop with headphones. The text above him said, "Jeff." I approached him and pressed K as the prompt commanded. A cutscene played, and it cut to a view from outside the window in the storm. The man could be seen on his chair, typing away, with the pitch-black darkness behind him. The thunder struck, and the lightning lit up the window, revealing the doctor right behind him. A space prompt came up, so I pressed it. The doctor then opened the pliers and drove them into the man's eyes. The man let out a cry of agony before the doctor covered his mouth. I pressed space again as commanded, then the doctor grabbed the man's laptop and closed it on his head, crushing it. Sparks shooting from the laptop and blood oozing. I started gagging at the horrendous sight. The doctor grabbed the closed laptop and aggressively twisted it. Immediately after, the screen went black as a large snapping noise erupted, followed by the sound of glass shattering. The cutscene continued as the door to the office opened, and another maintenance worker walked in. He noticed Jeff in the chair, leaning outside the broken window. The other worker pulled him out of the window and back into the chair, before screaming when he realized Jeff's head was completely crushed. The camera view showed the other worker, and behind him, a closet that opened a crack. The doctor's horrible smile could be seen through the crack. It faded to the gameplay. The other worker's name appeared above him, Rob. I walked out of the closet and snuck up behind him before pressing K. It cut to a first-person view of the doctor as he struck Rob on the back of his head with a mallet. The doctor then pulled out the saw and held it over Rob, who was barely conscious on the floor. I pressed K as commanded. And what happened next, I never knew I would see in a video game. The doctor started sawing into Rob's leg, slowly, blood spewing all over the place. Rob let out a gut-wrenching shriek. The sawing sounds were so realistic, as well as the screaming. It was unbearable. I almost wanted to cover my ears. The doctor stopped sawing and just ripped Rob's leg right off him, as if there wasn't enough blood in the room. Rob screamed until he seemed to begin losing consciousness. The doctor began striking Rob's head with his own severed leg. He repeatedly bashed Rob's head over and over until his brains were all over the floor. It showed Dr. Dead laughing demonically, while driving the bone end of Rob's leg into the stomach of his decapitated corpse. The next shot was the black van starting up and driving away from the alley. The camera panned up from the alley to a broken window stained with blood. The screen then faded to black, then typing across the screen was a red text. "My leg is killing me," followed by "Complete. Press space for next level." The joke did make me giggle a tiny bit, but I'd had enough Dr. Dead for one night. I turned my computer off. As I got up out of my chair, my legs were wobbly. I was dizzy from all those gory, disgusting kills. I poured myself a glass of water before heading to bed. I had trouble focusing at work the next day. My friend from work, Adam, knocked on my cubicle. "Hey, Mike, how many sales have you made so far?" he asked. "Well, I almost got one," I replied. "What's going on, man? You're usually top dog at this shit," he said. I wiped my eyes before responding. "I was up till midnight playing this really scary game I got at the pawn shop. It literally gave me nightmares." Adam then gave me a look of confusion. "Since when do pawn shops sell video games?" he asked. "That's what I thought. It's called Dr. Dead. Ever heard of it?" He shook his head. "Dr. Dead?" "Yeah, but it's spelled D-E-D without the A." "What the hell? What's it about?" "Well, Dr. Dead is the serial killer, and you play as him while he kills people." Adam's eyes widened as I explained. "Who would make a game like that?" I don't know, but the kills, dude, they're so raw and brutal. Like the effects are beyond realistic. It's like someone actually recorded people being gutted to make the game. I literally almost threw up when I played it. We both laughed before Adam asked me, "Okay, what was the worst kill?" I took a big gulp before explaining. Okay, so there was this one where he went up to this guy and whacked him across the head with a mallet. Then he gets a hacksaw and just starts sawing halfway into this guy's leg. Then I guess he just lost patience and just ripped it right off. It was so bloody and the guy's screams sounded so real. Dude, I almost fainted. I'm getting nauseous even talking about it. Adam started gagging as I told him. Then he uses the guy's leg to bash his brains in, and his head just explodes all over the floor. Jesus Christ! I know. Then he impales the guy's stomach with his own leg. As I said this, a lady a couple cubicles down peered over at us with a raised eyebrow. Okay, don't tell me anything else. I gotta pick this game up. Which pawn shop did you get it at? The one on the East Service Road, but I only saw one copy. I don't know if they have another. You can come over and we can take turns if you want. Sounds good. You off this weekend? Yep, I got the jack if you bring the coke. My man, Saturday, 8 o'clock? Fine with me. Just gonna warn you, it's worse than it sounds. I'll take the challenge. I got home at around 9. I made at least a few sales before I clocked out, so I was relieved enough. But I wasn't tired just yet. I changed into my pajamas and sat at my computer desk. I pressed the power button, and the startup for Dr. Dead played immediately. I guess the game took over the entire computer when the disc was in. I couldn't even tab out. It played the same intro cutscene once again. A panning view of a vast field was shown. The black van could be seen slowly driving up the field with its headlights off. The cattle in the field were all turning their heads as the van drove by. The van parked into a barn before the doctor stepped out. The van seemed to trigger a motion sensor when the light came on in the corner of the barn entrance. The next shot showed the doctor's black gloves pull the plug from behind the light. It cut to a view of the barn through a second-story window as the light in the barn slowly powered off. The farm level began. I walked past the barn and approached the front door of the farmhouse. One more light in the first floor window shut off. I pressed space on the farmhouse door and the text came up saying, "It's locked." I walked back into the barn to see if I could find a key. Inside the barn, there was a bright red lawnmower. I pressed space next to the lawnmower and it displayed in my inventory. Oh boy, I said to myself. Nothing else could be found in the barn. I tried walking to the side of the house, but I had reached the end of the platform. I noticed there was a brick-like object on the ground. I pressed space near the object, and it cut to the first-person view, showing the doctor's hands picking up the cinder block and revealing a small key underneath it. I approached the front door and pressed space, and the text came up saying, "It's locked. Maybe the key goes somewhere else." I walked now to the other side of the house, where there was a cellar door. The cellar door was chained with a lock. I pressed space on the cellar door, and the text came up saying, "You unlocked it." I also noticed the chain that was on the door was now displayed in the inventory. It did a black fading to the next layout. I was now in the cellar. Ahead of me was a staircase leading to the first floor, and next to it a table full of farming tools. There was a bright tool on the table that looked to be a bear trap. I pressed space on the bear trap, and sure enough, it displayed in the inventory above. Oh God, man, I'm not ready for this one, I said to myself. I was about to walk up the staircase before another space prompt came up. I pressed space and the doctor set the lawnmower wheels up at the bottom of the staircase to where the propeller blades were facing the top of the steps. The doctor then powered on the lawnmower before a short cutscene played. An elderly-looking man in striped pajamas could be seen waking up on the sofa to the noise of the lawnmower. The old man opened the closet and pulled out a .38 revolver. He then opened up the basement door at the top of the stairs. It cut back to the gameplay. The text above the old man read, "Mr. Miller." Mr. Miller took a few steps down into the cellar. I pressed the K key as commanded and did my best not to pass out at what happened next. The doctor whipped the chain up the stairs, with the bear trap attached to the end of it. The bear trap closed on Mr. Miller's knee. He was about to scream before the doctor tugged the chain back, causing the poor old man to fly down the stairs and right into the spinning lawnmower blades. The flesh and bone shredding in the blades was almost loud enough to muffle the dying shrieks of Mr. Miller. It cut back to the gameplay. I walked past the now broken lawnmower and up the steps. Mr. Miller, what was left of him, crawled for his life up the stairs with his only arm, stump I guess, dragging his intestines and leaving a trail of blood. Mr. Miller made it to the top step before the doctor slowly stepped over him and forcefully opened Miller's mouth and shoved it on the top step. Another K prompt appeared as Miller was biting down on the top step. I pressed K, then the doctor curb stomped Mr. Miller. I cringed so hard my face was sore. Blood leaking from the old man's mouth before it cut back to the gameplay. I walked out into the first floor of the house. I proceeded to where the light was coming from and ended up in the kitchen. Something was moving behind the kitchen counter. I walked over to it and an old woman in a wheelchair came storming out with a large kitchen knife and stabbed the doctor right in the gut. Dr. DED was unaffected, more so unamused. I pressed space as commanded and the doctor kicked Mrs. Miller out of her chair. She tried to crawl away before the doctor took the knife out of his gut like it was only a bee sting and grabbed both her hands before driving the knife through each hand and into the wood floor. I walked back around the counter as Mrs. Miller was writhing and shouting. A whistling kettle was on the stove. I pressed space on the kettle to obtain it. I walked back over to Mrs. Miller and as expected, a K prompt appeared. I thought I knew what was about to happen, but what did happen I never would have guessed. I pressed K and the game was now no longer a game. It cut to a first-person camera view showing an old woman. The doctor grabbed hold of her stomach and tore her entire belly open, blood erupting like lava from a volcano. She let out a horrendous cry of pain. The doctor opened the lid of the kettle and poured the boiling water inside her open stomach. Her face completely froze into a look of pure suffering. She wanted to scream, but she couldn't. Her insides were sizzling like raw meat in a furnace. Though I knew I would eventually, I vomited all over my keyboard. When I looked back up, the doctor was digging into Mrs. Miller's open stomach and ripped out a piece of her rib cage. He then shoved the ribs in her eye sockets. The doctor stood up and gazed down on the writhing, mutilated Mrs. Miller. She finally pushed the knife up out of the wood floor, and while her hands were still pegged by the blade, she stabbed herself in the neck 3 times before she finally gave up the ghost. She couldn't take it anymore. The screen faded to black after making the ominous victory chime. The red text typed across the screen, "Ribeye, medium rare." And then below it, "Complete. Press space for next level." I didn't know which Miller got it worse, but I knew one thing for certain. I'm done with this game. I ejected the game card, and as I did, there was a screen that appeared. It said, "Thanks for playing," in red text. At the bottom was the doctor giving 2 thumbs up in his bloody black gloves. At the bottom of the screen was an underlined text, "Dead.kills." The pawn shop closed at midnight, so I still had time. I arrived at the shop at around 11:40. I approached the cashier and requested a refund. Thank God I kept the receipt. He asked if it was at all broken, and I explained it wasn't in any poor condition, but rather just too violent of a game for me. I got my $10 back. I asked him if he knew anything about it, and all he knew was that one of the employees found it in the lost and found, and thought it might have partial value. No one knew what it was exactly. I stopped at a 7-Eleven on the way back to get some ibuprofen to calm my nerves and a Diet Coke. Thankfully, I didn't have to work until 4 tomorrow, so I had some time to stay up. I got home and made a couple frozen dinners and watched TV on the sofa. I kept thinking about the website link shown in the game. I was all too curious about what that was. I grabbed my laptop and sat on the sofa to search up Dead.kills. The 404 not found page is all that came up. I tried a different browser and still couldn't find anything. I activated my VPN and opened a private browser. You pick up a few skills when you're a low-income sales representative. I searched Dead.kills in the hidden browser, and as I pressed enter, my screen went completely black. Shortly after, a bunch of booting system commands showed up in red text at the top right of the screen. A website finally came up. It was like a blog of snuff films. All these different posts about different kills by Dr. Dead. I remember one in particular that made me sick to my stomach. One of the victims was a young boy with cerebral palsy. The caption was titled, "Special Dead." I kept scrolling as the kills and victims got worse and worse, one of them being a Catholic priest that was burned alive, with the caption, "Amazing Blaze." There were other kills that I just can't even talk about. They were so horrible. What is this game? Who are these people? What really unnerved me was the comments on the posts. Things like, "Keep up that good gore, DD," and "Good shit, Doc, keeping it brutal." I had so many questions. Is this even real? Why are people cheering on this monstrous character? I don't understand. I thought this was supposed to be a horror game that people play to get scared. But these delinquents are praising this killer like he's a famous world wrestler. Maybe I'm overreacting. It's just a game. The thing is, if it's just a game, why did I have to open a private browser to find the fan page? And why could I only find this game at a downtown pawn shop? Something wasn't right. I kept scrolling until I recognized one of the posts. Mix and match. The first one I did when I got the game. I clicked on the post. This was when I truly discovered the hell I had walked into. It showed the real photos of Stacy Collins, a 23-year-old girl found burned alive with her tongue missing. It was all too similar. The purple shirt, the bed, the room, everything was exactly like it was in the game. I wish I would have stopped there, but I kept looking. There was a link to the full article. I clicked it, and I was taken to my normal browser. It was a real source from the day before. Young woman found dead, killer still at large. It hit me like a train. This wasn't a video game. This was a reenactment of real murders. I had to get back to that pawn shop. The police needed to know. This has to be stopped. I was trying to leave, but I couldn't find my keys. I looked under the sofa cushions and saw nothing but crumbs and wrappers. I heard a loud glitch noise erupt from my TV. I slowly turned around to see the whole screen covered with static, red static. All I could comprehend from what happened next was that my time had come. The screen then showed a pixelated view of a familiar-looking neighborhood. It showed a black van driving down a familiar avenue. The van slowly pulled up and parked in front of a familiar house. I wanted to scream, but I was in so much shock I couldn't make a noise. The screen then showed the gameplay of the doctor walking up a front lawn and looking through a window of the house. The view of the layout expanded to where it showed a character inside of the house looking at a TV. The text above the character said, "Mike, my name." I looked out the window to see a large black van parked right on my front lawn. I could see something in the corner of my eye. I looked at the small window on top of the front door, and right outside my front door, looking right at me, his face. His horrible face.
Hey Mike, it's Adam. You didn't show up to work today, so I just wanted to give you a call, see what's up. Also, hey, I got the game you were talking about at the pawn shop. I guess there was another copy left, but yeah man, holy fuck, you were not kidding. That shit is fucking brutal. Oh, and get this, one of the victims' names was Mike. And I gotta say man, you did not get off easy. But yeah man, just give me a call back when you can. Alright, bye.